If you're having days where you're like, wow, I don't even really feel like a human at all, you could be making very common mistakes that could be draining electrolytes from your system. And these electrolytes like sodium and calcium and potassium and magnesium and lots of others are very important. You kind of want to view them like charge carriers. And there's these electrical impulses that have to happen in the body for pretty much every biological function. And when these minerals are not available, those signals and those electrical impulses don't happen, and we start to create all these symptoms like fatigue and dizzy spells and cramps and why do I feel so weak, and these can all kind of be viewed like your electrical grid is having a brownout. So we're going to go over some studies here. I'll have links to all these studies in the description below that'll go over some very common mistakes that millions of people make. And the first thing we want to look at is caffeine, and we'll look at this study here on the effects of dietary caffeine on renal handling of minerals in adult women. And what they found was that it wasn't like it was just a diuretic effect. Basically, what we were looking at the caffeine doing is it was blocking this mineral reabsorption. So basically, the kidneys filter out our blood all day long and they pull water and minerals and toxic junk out of there, and then we reabsorb most of that water and the minerals. But what they found in this study was that the caffeine was blocking that reabsorption. So not all of those minerals were being reabsorbed. It was reabsorbing less. And so when they're not reabsorbed, they get peed out. And when we look at this study here on the effect of high-dose short-term caffeine intake and the renal clearance of calcium, sodium, and creatinine in healthy adults, they said this study demonstrated that caffeine intake has a significant impact on the calcium renal clearance in healthy adults. Specifically, the consumption of 800 milligrams of caffeine resulted in a 77% increase in calcium renal clearance compared to the placebo over a 9-hour assessment period. So this is just a good visual of what a lot of caffeine is doing. Most people are not going to have like 8 cups worth a day, though a lot of people will have that throughout the day. But you can see that if it's that significant, a 77% increase, even if you're just having 1 or 2 cups of coffee, that could be a 10, 15, 20% decrease. So what we want to understand when we're looking at all of these mistakes that people can make is that for most people where things are working correctly, none of these things alone are really going to create any trouble. But if somebody already has low mineral levels, any of these things could turn their world upside down and create all kinds of havoc. So it's really going to vary from person to person as to how these things are going to affect them. But if you're having trouble and your electrolytes are low, then you might have to do all of these things right until you can correct that problem. If you're not sure if your electrolytes are low, we'll have a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of low electrolytes, and you can dig into that a little bit. But the next thing we want to look at is the problem with carbohydrate extremes. And this can really go in either direction. If somebody's consuming way too many carbohydrates, especially processed junk carbohydrates, it has the ability to create a magnesium depletion because magnesium is needed to process these carbohydrates correctly. Of course, there's other ways that it can create troubles too. When sugar goes really high, now the kidneys are going to say, oh, I got to try and pee out some of this sugar. And then when that sugar's going out through osmosis, it's going to bring more water and a lot more minerals out that door as well. And this is why a lot of these processed junk carbohydrates are called anti-nutrients, because the way that they're processed kind of pulls all the minerals out of them. So when you eat this, you're not bringing minerals in, and they have the ability to either use up minerals or push them out of the system. Now we can look at this other direction, and what about really significant carb restriction? So I like to use a low carb diet with most of my clients. I'm a fan of ketogenic diets. I'm a fan of no carb carnivore diets, and I'll use those with specific clients when they are right for that individual. But for a lot of people, and they already have low minerals, this has the ability to really create some trouble. Let's look at this study here on effects of hypocaloric, low-fat, ketogenic, and ketone supplement diets. And they said similar to fasting, ketogenic diets are associated with decreased insulin stimulation and increased excretion of sodium, a process called nutrioresis of fasting, or more broadly, the nutrioresis of nutritional ketosis. If the additional excretion of sodium is not replaced, a ketogenic diet leads to decreased circulating volume and associated symptoms, i.e. dizziness, fatigue, weakness, and presumably increased adrenal stimulation of aldosterone. So we're looking at a situation where when these minerals and everything go so low, it can really raise stress hormones because the body's freaking out like, I kind of need that so that I can function correctly. So what we're looking at with these types of diets, again, I'm a fan of these types of diets, but the benefits of these diets come from really lowering insulin levels. So we're really lowering the amount of insulin that the body needs so that now it can reduce all that inflammation and all the trouble that high insulin was creating. But when insulin goes too low, this nutrioresis kicks in, and now when we're excreting all this sodium, other minerals are going to go with that. Now, the difference between this being problematic and a really helpful situation depends on the mineral level of the person doing the diet in the first place. No matter what level of carbohydrates or whatever protein is being converted to carbohydrates, the body is going to make some insulin. And the amount of insulin that each person will make to process a specific amount of carbs is going to vary from person to person. It's going to depend on how effective their insulin is. Some people may only need to make a very small amount of insulin to process these very low or no carbs or the glucose coming from protein. Or some people might need to make a little bit more. When we couple it with that person's starting point of mineral content in the system, then we see that some people are going to do great, some people are going to have a whole lot of trouble. But we want to be aware of what's going on when we really reduce carbohydrate. Now, the other aspect of this, it's not just about insulin, it can be about glycogen depletion as well. Glycogen is a form of glucose that's stored in the liver and in our muscles, and when we deplete our glucose levels, we deplete the glycogen as well. And when this glycogen gets burned up, this is basically glucose that's stored with water. And this water that's attached in the glycogen also contains minerals. So when we're depleting all this glycogen, we're also getting rid of that water and all the minerals that go with it. This is why people lose so much water weight when they first start looking at this low carbohydrate situation, because they're sending out all of this sodium and all of the water that's attached to that sodium. So when we're helping clients figure out if they should be using a low carb or even a ketogenic or even a no carb carnivore type situation, they need to figure out, do they qualify? Do they have enough minerals to withstand the decrease of what's going to happen? That's why you hear so much about, oh man, you got to use these mineral supplements when you're on a ketogenic diet, because so many people go so low that it creates trouble for them. So even if you're not going in this full-on ketogenic situation, if you're really lowering carbs, you might need to understand that if insulin's coming down, you could be depleting more minerals that way. Next, let's look at alcohol, and this study on alcohol's impact on kidney function that says studies historically have shown that alcohol consumption markedly increases magnesium excretion in the urine and may affect magnesium levels in other ways as well. And this study said that this is happening because the alcohol is suppressing this vasopressin, which is an anti-diuretic hormone that kind of tells the kidneys, hey, why don't you reabsorb all these minerals? And when it suppresses that, the minerals don't get reabsorbed and then they get peed out. Now, this is the big one for me, and that is hypochlorhydria, or low stomach acid. So we're going to look at this study here on proton pump inhibitor induced hypomagnesemia. And this is so widely accepted that the FDA even put out a warning that said the FDA has issued a public safety communication warning that the long-term use of prescription proton pump inhibitors is potentially associated with low magnesium levels. And I've talked in lots of other videos about how this PPI use can restrict things like iron and calcium and other minerals as well. And the thing that we need to understand is that a person doesn't need to be on a PPI to be able to restrict this mineral absorption. Just having low stomach acid restricts our ability to absorb these minerals. And people can have low stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. One reason is they might not have enough zinc. The body needs zinc to be able to make hydrochloric acid, but the body needs hydrochloric acid to be able to digest the food well enough to pull the zinc out. So people can get stuck with this broken digestion for years or decades. If you're not sure how your stomach acid is, we'll have a link below for our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid, and you can see if that might be an issue for you. But if that's a problem, that really has to be fixed. Which really brings us to this last one, which is stress. And when we look at this study on magnesium status and stress, and they found that when the body is stressed, that it can cause us to lose magnesium, and then that loss of magnesium stresses the body out, and you end up with this cycle where you can't really break out of that. So another interesting thing is that if somebody's really stressed, that pushes them into this sympathetic fight or flight side of their autonomic nervous system, which means they can't make their stomach acid correctly. We need to be in the parasympathetic side of our autonomic nervous system, be able to make that hydrochloric acid and break down the food and get all the minerals out of it. So you can see that these things can really be connected in a variety of ways. And we want to keep basic things in mind too, like maybe a person's drinking way too much water, or maybe they're doing way too much sweating and they're not really replenishing the minerals that are being washed out. So how seriously a person needs to either avoid or correct these issues is really going to depend on the issues that they're dealing with and the level of minerals that they have in the system. If somebody's having a lot of trouble, they can just supplement with some minerals. We like to see them do that around food so that it gives the body a better chance to assimilate those minerals. And if there are digestive malfunctions, those have to be fixed, or you're going to have a hard time really correcting the problem. And remember, if your doctor is telling you to take a PPI, I'm not telling you not to take one just because these studies showed troubles they can create. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm basically a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 different doctors couldn't figure that out, I had to dig for my own answers. So now, 20 years later, I've been teaching health professionals in more than 40 countries how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. But we'll have all these studies here below in the description that you can go through and figure out the right questions to ask your doctor. But if you know that you're having digestive issues and you're new to this channel, you don't know how to fix those, you can jump over right now and check out our video on full digestive reset. And we'll have those other videos in the description below. I can't wait to hear about your results.